The Jeff Younger Show is on. Dedicated to my sons, James and Jude.
Every institution tells you what it values. Every corporation, every government, every church, every family court. They'll tell you one thing, but if you know what to look for, you'll see another. Aristotle gave us the key 2,400 years ago. He said, quote, "The declaration of the controlling element is the controlling factor," unquote. So you need to find who actually makes the decisions, identify what they optimize for, and you'll understand any institution better than the people inside. So today, how to see through the funnel. Aristotle's teaching is simple but devastating. Every organization has a controlling element, the person or group that actually decides things, not who's supposed to decide, not who has the title, but who actually controls outcomes. Every organization there's a nominal organization and a real organization. The nominal organization is the way things are in the org chart and what people say it is and what they tell the investors it is. The real organization is the real use of power and how stuff gets done. And to tell you the truth, there's as many kinds of controlling elements as there are types of constitutions. So we can think of this as a form of politics in companies, and we can think of the same thing with our states. We can think of the same thing in diplomacy. So let's look at it that way. Aristotle says there's basically four kinds of government: democracy, oligarchy, aristocracy, and monarchy. But don't get hung up on these labels. The principles apply everywhere. It's basically like this. In a democracy, the many decide. It's usually by lot or by vote. In an oligarchy, the wealthy decide. Offices go to those who pass a property assessment or can afford to raise an army. In an aristocracy, the educated decide, those who've mastered the laws and customs. In a monarchy, one person decides everything. Now, each of these has a different character, and each produces different outcomes. Each optimizes for a different goal. So your job is to figure out which one you're really dealing with, regardless of what the institution calls itself, regardless of what it is on paper. Look, you aren't supposed to find this channel. The algorithm didn't recommend me. You found this because someone shared it or because you went looking for something the mainstream just won't give you. That's how real information moves now. Hand to hand, man to man, just like combat. I can't make it show you. I can't get YouTube to do what I want. But I can ask you to do one thing: subscribe and hit the bell. Not for me, for the next man looking for what you found. The gatekeepers control discovery. We control distribution. If this helped you, make sure you see the next one. Send it to someone who needs it. Cut through the bullshit. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. That's the play. Now, Aristotle doesn't just give you four types. He actually gives you six. There's three correct forms and three degenerate forms. So the way this works is you have kingship, which is ruled by one virtuous leader who governs for the common good. You have aristocracy, which is ruled by the virtuous few, those with education, judgment, and proven character. And a polity, which is ruled by the virtuous many, a broad citizenry that governs itself according to reasonable law and custom. Each of these has a degenerate form. Tyranny is the corruption of kingship. One man still rules, but now for his own benefit, not the common good. Oligarchy is the corruption of aristocracy. The few still rule, but now they're just wealthy, not the virtuous, and merit has been replaced by money. Democracy is the corruption of polity. The many still rule, but now without virtue, without law, without restraint, without reason. Every appetite just gets a vote. The difference between correct and degenerate forms is very simple. You just have to ask who benefits. In correct forms, the rulers govern for the common good. They strive to produce an outcome that gives the best overall outcome for the whole system. In degenerate forms, they just govern for themselves and take everything for themselves and damn everybody else. Now, knowing which form you're in is very important because The same structure, one ruler, few rulers, many rulers, can produce very different outcomes depending on whether it's oriented toward the common good or toward some private person's passions or interests. All right, so let's make this operational. Each constitution, correct or degenerate, pursues a specific kind of goal. People inside that system choose what furthers that end. So if you know what that end is, you can predict choices. And being able to predict things, if you recall from our previous video, half of fortune is luck. So the more that you can predict, the less you have to rely on that half that's luck. You bring more into your control. So this is a very important way to think about how you can gain more control by being able to predict what the goals of an organization are. Kingship optimizes for the good of the whole. The virtuous king asks, what does my realm need? His decisions aim at flourishing, order, the long-term health of his people. Maybe there's a corporation, it's ruled completely by the CEO. He makes every decision. Everybody simply does what he says in a hierarchy. But he's aiming for the common good and the overall wealth of the people who work for the company and for the investors. That'd be an example of a kingship in a corporation. A tyranny optimizes for keeping guard. The tyrant rules basically unwilling subjects, and he knows it. Every decision serves his survival. It has to, because everybody hates him. He weakens potential rivals, enriches loyalists, keeps everyone afraid and divided, and he can't think past the next threat. And you've probably seen this in corporations. The CEO or the COO that basically causes nothing but trouble in an organization to prevent power centers from. This is a company that's run as a tyranny. A company that's run that way always is running defense internally. Aristocracy optimizes for education and custom. It aims at preserving a certain way of life, maintaining standards, transmitting what's excellent to the next generation. You see this a lot in companies. Hewlett-Packard used to be like this. It was a company that was basically run by an aristocracy of top engineers. And their idea was to preserve high standards and to produce amazing products, which they did do, right? Eventually, they were taken over by a CEO who began to rule them like a tyrant and destroy the company. Now, it was easy to see that this female CEO was going to destroy Hewlett-Packard because you could see immediately the way she changed the board and the management structure. It was no longer an aristocracy. See what I mean about how you can predict things because you know an organization is going to have a different goal. Oligarchy optimizes for wealth. The oligarch measures everything by profit. He'll sacrifice tradition, loyalty, even his own long-term interests he'll sacrifice. Okay, money now is the only motive that matters. You see this a lot in sales-driven organizations where different sales VPs in various business units basically have all the power in the company. And it just becomes a money now operation. They can't think long-term. Usually destroys companies. It's one of the things that actually happened to IBM. Polity optimizes for ordered freedom. It's liberty under law. It's not license. The citizen body governs itself by established customs and procedures that balance freedom and responsibility. Okay? But democracy optimizes for freedom without limit. The democratic character wants autonomy. It resents being told what to do. It treats every restriction as oppression. Democratic institutions will sacrifice order, excellence, and even safety to preserve the feeling of absolute freedom. This is what you saw in a lot of tech companies when you basically had people walking out on work over diversity issues or political issues or during Black Lives Matter or whatever, right? The company was effectively run as a democracy. It had decentralized power. A lot of those companies turned themselves back into aristocracies and took that power back because of that kind of stuff. Do you see how this can be your diagnostic frame? When you encounter an institution, ask two questions. Who actually controls it and what are they optimized for? And the answers will tell you exactly what kind of constitution that you're really dealing with. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting, though. What about the mixed regime? The ancient regimes knew that pure forms don't last. Kingship will degenerate into tyranny. Aristocracy will degenerate into oligarchy. Polity will degenerate into democracy. And democracy collapses into mob rule until a strong man restores order. And then you have a king, and then the cycle starts over again. It's called anacyclosis. So the great political thinkers asked, is there a way to stabilize a system like that, to get the benefits of each form while checking its excesses? And their answer was the mixed regime. Today, we'd call it a republic, and it was the basis for the American government. A mixed regime deliberately combines elements of the one, the few, and the many, and it builds in tension between them by design, each element checking the others. No single controlling element can push the Constitution toward an extreme. Rome is a good model of this. The consuls provided monarchical energy, decisive executive action. They didn't have to ask anybody for permission. The Senate provided aristocratic wisdom, both the experience and continuity for long-term thinking. And the popular or tribal assemblies provided democratic legitimacy as the voice of the citizen body, where they could force the government to deal with issues cared for by the people. Now, each element had real power, and each could block the others. The system forced them to compromise and prevented any faction from dominating completely. The American founders studied Rome obsessively. The presidency is the monarchy element. The Senate was designed as the aristocratic element. And this was originally appointed by the state legislators, and it was meant to control passions of the moment. And the House is the democratic element, directly elected by the people. And the genius of a mixed regime is that it acknowledges an uncomfortable truth. Every pure form has within it the seeds of its own corruption. The one becomes a tyrant, the few become oligarchs, the many become a mob. But by mixing the forms, you set ambition against ambition. You make it structurally difficult for any faction to seize total control. But here's what you need to understand. A mixed regime is still unstable by nature. A lot of American conservatives cannot understand this. They can't accept it. A mixed regime like the US Constitution is still unstable. It's a balancing act. The elements are always pulling against one another. They're always trying to expand power, but when they expand in one area, they have to reduce the power of the other one, okay? So when you analyze a republic, you have to ask, which element's winning? Now, I've seen companies run effectively as mixed regimes, where you had decision-making power vested in senior VPs and up. You had long-term continuity in senior middle management, director, senior director, VP, and the long-term vision of the company and continuity was preserved by them. And at the bottom, you have people that would surface their concerns to both groups through a kind of democratic action. Okay, that's great. The problem, though, is the monarchical element getting too powerful? Is the CEO trying to get more power? Of course he is. Is the oligarchic element in the middle of the company trying to capture the system? Of course they are. They often do it through budgetary practices. Is the democratic element overwhelming the others? We saw that in California when we had these work walkouts at Google and so forth. The idea of pure majoritarianism, destruction of procedural limits, mob energy that overrules institutional practices. A healthy republic keeps the elements in tension, but a dying republic watches one element devour all the others. And that's what too often happens with republicans, and happens much more often in businesses that are run as a mixed regime than it happens in political regimes. So basically, what I'm telling you is that most institutions just fucking lie about what they are. Now, they don't always do this consciously, but the label that they give you just doesn't match reality. How many people actually believe the mission statements put out by these companies? They're all bullshit. Okay. A corporation calls itself a meritocracy where the best ideas win, where anyone can rise if they just contribute. But watch who actually gets promoted. Watch whose opinions get heard in the meetings. Watch who controls the budget. You'll find an oligarchy or a monarchy wearing the clothes of a meritocracy most of the time. A government might call itself a democracy, but track who actually writes the laws, who funds the campaigns, who staffs the agencies, who's the prosecutors to decide what laws get prosecuted. You'll find an oligarchy or an aristocracy running the show, a permanent class that kind of rotates through positions while the voting public feels like they're voting and changing things when they're really not. A lot of churches call themselves a servant community, but look who really controls the place, who controls the money, who gets disciplined, who gets protected. The reality of the kind of constitutional ruling that church is going to show itself. Courts, American courts, family courts, infamous for this, right? They call themselves forums for the best interest of the child, but identify the controlling element. What do the judges, the psychologists, the attorneys actually optimize for? Often it's their own convenience, their professional relationships, their ideology, and how much money they can force you to pay them. The child's interest is the label, but the reality is something awful and much worse. So Aristotle's method of thinking about what kind of regime you're dealing with cuts through all this bullshit. So you can find the controlling element, identify what it optimizes for, and now you have found the true constitution and the true goal of the organization. And now you have information you didn't have before, information that can reduce the impact of that one half of fortune that's pure luck. So look, like I said, this is not just political theory. It's survival intelligence, man. When you're trying to navigate an institution, you want to get a job, you want to win a court case, you want to close a deal, you want to get a permit from your city or county. I watched a video once where a grown man literally got on his knees and begged people to subscribe. Hands clasped, voice cracking. I think there was a sound effect like a whoopee cushion or some shit. That's what the algorithm rewards. Performance. Bullshit performance. Desperation theater. Well, I'm not fucking doing that. Here's the situation. I make videos. YouTube buries them unless you subscribe. That's the game. I didn't design it, but I understand it. You want more of this? Subscribe. Hit the bell. You don't? Fine. Go find one of the guys who will beg for it. There's plenty of those assholes on YouTube. But if you're here because you're tired of being sold to, tired of being manipulated and performed for, then you already know what to do, man. Just 2 clicks. Subscribe, bell. No theatrics, man. Do it. You need to know who actually controls outcomes and what they want. Appealing to the stated values of a democracy when you're actually facing an oligarchy, it's worse than useless. Okay, it marks you as a dumbass, and the oligarchs will smile and nod at your principled arguments, and then they're going to do what serves their interests, and because you're a dumbass, they'll punish you just on principle. Okay, appealing to profit when you're facing an aristocracy is just as dumb. They'll find you vulgar and shut you out, even if your proposal would have made them money. Okay, the man who sees clearly these things and matches his approach to the actual constitution of the organization that he's approaching, he figures out who decides, he learns what they optimize for, and he frames his approach accordingly. It's not manipulation. It's seeing the world as it really is. This is a realist show. It's seeing the world as it really is. It's being accurate. You can't persuade anyone out of anything, and you can't persuade anyone of anything until you understand what actually moves them. And Aristotle just puts it bluntly. The greatest and most controlling of all things as regards being capable of persuading and giving good advice is to get a grasp on all constitutions and to distinguish the characters, customs, and advantages of each one. Master this, and you're going to see what others miss. Think about this. Get off the internet, think about it, and go do something with it.
The Jeff Younger Show, signing off.